The invoice was printed on cream-colored paper, typed in a professional font, and slid across the kitchen counter toward me like I was a stranger walking into a hotel lobby. At the top, in bold letters, guest stay invoice, 14 NIGHTS. At the bottom, total due, $4,200. My son handed it to me with the same expression he uses when closing a business deal, calm, practiced, unbothered. Then he poured himself a cup of coffee from the machine I had shipped to him as a housewarming gift and said, "I figured we could settle up before you head back to Phoenix, Dad." I stood there in the kitchen of the $1.2 million house I had purchased for him 18 months ago, holding an invoice for sleeping in one of its 7 bedrooms, and I did something my son never expected. I smiled. My name is Daniel Hargrove. I am 63 years old, and for 4 decades I ran a construction and real estate development company that I built from a single dump truck and a borrowed credit card. I have made millions, lost hundreds of thousands, rebuilt again, and learned more about human nature from a construction site than most people learn in a lifetime. I raised 2 children. My daughter Patricia lives in Portland with her husband and 3 kids. She calls me every Sunday. She has never once asked me for anything she didn't genuinely need, and when I offer help, she accepts it graciously and pays it forward in a dozen ways I don't even know about. Then there is Marcus. Marcus Hargrove is 34 years old. He is tall, handsome, charming when he wants to be, and gifted with a mind so sharp it could cut glass. He got his MBA from Vanderbilt. He works in financial consulting, which means he spends his days advising wealthy people on how to keep their money, while spending his nights finding creative ways to acquire more of mine. I am not saying he is a bad person. I want to be careful here, because what I am about to tell you is not a story about a villain. It is a story about a man who never learned the difference between being loved and being owed. And a father who took far too long to teach him. The house situation began 3 years ago, when Marcus called me from a parking garage in Nashville because he didn't want his girlfriend, Simone, to hear the conversation. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something big," he said. I could hear the hushed urgency in his voice, the careful calibration of a man setting up a pitch. He explained that he had found what he described as a generational opportunity. A property in a premium Nashville neighborhood, a 7-bedroom craftsman-style home on nearly an acre, in a school district that was becoming the most sought after in the city. The sellers needed to move fast. The price was $1.1 million, but with the market moving the way it was, the property would be worth $1.04 to $1.6 million within 3 years. He had run the numbers. He had the comps. He had everything except the down payment and the credit profile to carry a mortgage of that size, because 2 years earlier he had made some aggressive investment decisions that had left his personal finances complicated. "I want to buy it as an investment, Dad," he said. "You front the purchase. I'll live in it, maintain it, and when we sell, or when I refinance and buy you out, we split whatever appreciation we've gained. It's a win-win." I asked him to send me the numbers. He did. They were good. Not exceptional, but solid, and I trusted his financial mind more than almost anyone I knew when it came to reading a market. What I did not ask, and should have, was a simpler question. "Marcus, what do you think this means? What do you think it will cost me beyond money?" I did not ask it, I wired the money. I purchased the property in my name, signed a handshake agreement with my son about terms and timeline, and told him to make it a home. He did. He made it a beautiful home. He furnished it exquisitely. He landscaped the yard, installed a home gym in the basement, converted one of the bedrooms into a recording studio for the music hobby he never quite turned into anything. He hosted dinner parties and called the house ours, in a way that was warm and inclusive when his friends were listening, but shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, whenever the conversation turned to finances. The first sign was 7 months in, when I mentioned stopping by for a long weekend. I live in Phoenix. Nashville is not a quick trip, but it is manageable, and I had not seen the house in person since the closing walkthrough. "That works," Marcus said. "Just let me know your exact dates so I can make sure your room is ready." Your room, not the guest room, not any bedroom. One specific room, already designated for me, in a house I owned, requiring advanced scheduling. I noticed it, I filed it. The second sign was at Christmas. I flew Patricia and her family to Nashville, paid for everyone's flights and accommodation at a hotel downtown because I did not want to crowd Marcus and Simone's space. On Christmas morning, we gathered at the house. Marcus made mimosas. Simone made a spectacular brunch. It was genuinely wonderful. But when I offered to contribute to the meal costs, I had brought wine, gifts, groceries. Marcus waved me off with a magnanimous smile and said, "Don't worry about it, Dad. It all comes out of the household fund anyway." The household fund, a phrase that meant nothing to me then. 2 weeks later, I received a text from him with a PayPal link. The message said, "Hey Dad, just sending along the household expense summary from the holidays, groceries, decorations, extra utilities. My share comes out to about $340. Happy New Year." I sat in my kitchen in Phoenix for a long time looking at that text. Then I paid it because I told myself it was just a quirk, a boundary. Young people had different relationships with money now. He was being transparent, not transactional. I was being old-fashioned. I paid it and I said nothing, and I filed it. Over the next year, the fees accumulated with quiet consistency. When I visited and needed airport transportation, Marcus informed me that Simone's car was in the shop and he would need to bill me for the rideshare. When I asked him to handle a small repair issue at the house, a gutter that had come partially loose, he sent me an invoice from a contractor with a note that said he had managed the process, and his coordination time was billed at his consulting rate of $175 per hour for 3 hours. $525 to make a phone call and answer the door. Each time I paid without comment. Each time the number in my mental ledger grew larger, not the financial number, the other one, the one that tracked what was happening to my relationship with my son, and what it said about who he had become, and what it said about who I had allowed him to become. I spoke to Patricia about it once, carefully, leaving out amounts and softening details. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "Dad, when's the last time Marcus called you just to talk? Not about the house, not about money, just to talk." I thought about it. I could not remember. The visit that changed everything happened in October. I flew to Nashville for 12 days. I had told Marcus 6 weeks in advance. The trip had a purpose beyond visiting. I wanted to assess the property, discuss the future of our arrangement, and have an honest conversation about the timeline for Marcus to buy me out, something we had not revisited since the original handshake. I arrived on a Tuesday. Marcus and Simone were gracious hosts. The house was beautiful. We had good dinners. I met some of their friends. I watched Marcus move through the world with the easy confidence of a man who believed everything around him was precisely as it should be. On the Thursday of my second week, I came downstairs early in the morning to find Simone in the kitchen, and something about the hour and the quiet made her lower her guard in a way she normally didn't. "Daniel," she said, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug, "can I ask you something honest?" "Always," I said. She looked toward the hallway, listening for Marcus. "Do you know how much Marcus has been charging the household account for things he manages on your behalf?" I told her I had a sense of it. She shook her head slowly. "It's more than you think. He tracks everything. He has a spreadsheet. He's been doing it since before you even closed on the house." She paused. "I love him, but sometimes I don't recognize him when it comes to this stuff. It's like there's a version of Marcus that only appears around money, and I don't." She stopped. "I shouldn't be telling you this." "Simone," I said gently, "you're not telling me anything I haven't already seen." She nodded and went upstairs. I sat in the kitchen for an hour, the kitchen with the countertops I had paid for, beneath the ceiling I had bought, in the neighborhood my son had chosen, in the house he had asked me to purchase, in the life he had built inside a gift he had accepted without once, not once, saying, "Thank you, Dad, I couldn't have done this without you." Not because he was ungrateful. I want to be precise here. I believe Marcus felt something like gratitude, but gratitude in his internal accounting was a private emotion, something he experienced without needing to express, because expressing it would acknowledge that something had been given, and Marcus had quietly, over many years, reclassified everything given to him as something owed. He had grown up comfortable, too comfortable. I had worked so hard to give my children what I never had that I had accidentally given Marcus something dangerous, a life in which comfort arrived before he understood its cost. Patricia had understood. Something in her character, her mother's practicality, her own experiences, the friends she had chosen, had taught her the weight of things. She carried gratitude like ballast. It kept her steady. Marcus had somehow learned to float on it instead. The invoice appeared on Saturday morning, 2 days before I was scheduled to fly home. 14 nights at $300 per night. Printed, professional, waiting on the kitchen counter. Marcus explained it calmly. He said he had been thinking about it for a while, and that it wasn't personal. It was just that having a long-term house guest created real costs, additional utilities, food, the use of common spaces, and that his financial advisor had actually suggested he begin treating the property more like an asset and less like a family convenience. He said he hoped I understood. He said he knew it might seem unusual, but that he had always appreciated how our relationship was built on transparency and clear terms. He poured his coffee. He waited. I picked up the invoice. I read it carefully, every line. Then I folded it in half, creased it precisely, and set it back on the counter. "I'm not going to pay this," I said. Marcus blinked. "Dad." "I'm not finished." My voice was calm, completely calm, the kind of calm that takes 63 years to build. "I'm not going to pay this invoice. And I want to tell you why, because I think you deserve to understand it fully rather than just receive a reaction from me." He set down his coffee. I told him the truth. I told him about the PayPal requests and the contractor invoices and the holiday receipts and the airport rides and the gutter phone call. I told him I had paid all of it without complaint because I had been waiting, hoping that he would stop on his own, that something in him would recognize what he was doing and recalibrate. "I kept thinking," I said, "that the next call would just be a call, that you'd call me someday and we'd talk for an hour about nothing, about baseball, about your grandmother's recipes, about something that had nothing to do with this house or money, and we'd just be a father and a son." His jaw tightened. "I call you Dad." "You do," I said, "when there's a reason." He was quiet. "Marcus, I need to tell you something about this house." I kept my voice steady. "You have been living here for 18 months. In that time I have paid the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, and approximately $3,800 in various fees you have directed my way for the privilege of being your father within these walls. I have never asked you for a rent payment because the original agreement was built on appreciation and a future buyout. But I want you to understand something clearly. This is still my house. I own it. Every beam, every tile, every acre of this yard." His face changed then. Something behind his eyes shifted in a way I had never seen before. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when I drive to the airport on Monday," I told him, "I'm going to call my attorney, and I'm going to begin the process of selling this property." The silence that followed was the longest either of us had sat in since his mother's funeral. "You can't." "I can," I said. "I can absolutely do that. It is within my complete legal right, and I want you to sit with that for a moment, not as a threat, but as a mirror. Because you handed me an invoice this morning, Marcus, in your father's house. You handed me an invoice, and I want you to think about what you believed would happen next. Did you think I would just pay it? Did you think that was a reasonable thing to ask?" He said nothing. "Or did some part of you know that it wasn't, and do it anyway, because you've been testing me for 18 months to see how much I would absorb before I said something?" I saw it land. The truth has a particular way of landing, not like a blow, but like a key fitting into a lock that's been rusted shut for years. You can watch a person feel it happen. Marcus sat down. He sat down at the kitchen table, and the carefully composed face of a 34-year-old financial consultant quietly fell apart. And underneath it was something much younger and much more familiar to me. Something I had not seen since he was 9 years old and had broken a neighbor's window and tried to negotiate his way out of the consequences for 45 minutes before finally bursting into tears. "I don't know why I do it," he said. His voice was different. "I don't know when I started." He stopped, pressed his hands flat on the table. "I think I got so used to things working out because of you that I started feeling like I needed to make it transactional so it didn't feel like charity. So I could tell myself I was managing it, that I was still in control of my own life." "But you charged me rent," I said, not unkindly. "I know. You charged me rent in a house I bought you." "I know, Dad." I sat across from him. "You are not a client, Marcus, and I am not an investor. I am your father, and I have spent 3 years being treated like an inconvenience in a transaction that was supposed to be a gift." He was crying quietly now. Simone had appeared at the bottom of the stairs, and when she saw Marcus's face, she stopped and stayed very still, giving us the room. "I don't want to sell the house," I said finally. "I want to keep it, and I want us to sit down together this week before I leave and restructure the arrangement properly. A real legal document, real terms, a real path toward you owning this property outright." I paused. "But the other thing also has to change." "I know," he said. "I need you to call me sometimes," I told him, and my voice broke a little on the last word, just slightly, just enough. "Not about the house, just a call." He nodded. "And Marcus," I waited until he looked at me. "I need you to understand something your grandfather told me when I was about your age, when I was starting the company and feeling like I had to earn every inch of ground I stood on and couldn't accept help from anyone." I paused, feeling the old man's voice in my chest where it had lived for 30 years. He said, "Son, there is no weakness in being loved. The weakness is in refusing to feel it." My son looked at me across the kitchen table. Outside, a Tennessee October was doing what it does, turning everything it touches gold. I did not sell the house. We spent Sunday and Monday in a conversation that was uncomfortable and overdue, and in the end, something I can only describe as a relief for both of us. We called my attorney on Monday morning and began drafting a proper co-ownership agreement with a defined buyout timeline and clear terms. We burned the invoice, literally, in the backyard fire pit, which was Marcus's idea and which made Simone laugh until she cried. He called me the following Friday, no reason, just to talk. We spoke for an hour and 40 minutes about baseball, about a documentary he had watched, about a memory he had of the two of us driving through the Arizona desert when he was 11, and the truck breaking down and spending 4 hours on the side of the road eating gas station sandwiches and watching the sunset. That was a good day, he said. It was one of the best days I ever had, I told him. He called the following Friday too. And the one after that. I'm not writing this as a cautionary tale about ungrateful children, because I do not believe Marcus was fundamentally ungrateful. I am writing it as a cautionary tale about what happens when a parent gives abundantly, but never teaches a child to receive graciously, when love is expressed so consistently through provision that a child begins to mistake provision for love's only language, and then slowly, unconsciously, begins to speak that language back. I taught my son that money solves problems. What I failed to teach him was that the most important things in his life were never problems money was designed to solve. He is still learning that, so if I am being honest, am I? The house in Nashville is still his home. The mortgage is still in my name, for now. But there is a legal document on both our desks and a real plan, and an honest conversation between us that didn't exist before an invoice on cream-colored paper reminded me that I had been too patient for too long. Sometimes the unthinkable thing is not a dramatic act of severance or punishment. Sometimes the unthinkable thing is simply telling your son the truth, and then staying at the table long enough to hear what he says back.